Vayeshev Yaakov beretz Bugurei Ovid beretz Canaan. And Yaakov settled in the land of the sojournings of his father in the land of Canaan. So over here, there's a famous Rabbeinu Bachya. Rabbeinu Bachya or Bachaya always introduces every parsha with a verse in Mishlei. And he says literally what the whole story, I always say with the name of the Chofetz Chaim, that there was a person, a very wealthy Jew, came from the United States, and he never met the Chofetz Chaim before. But he was an observant Jew, and he always wanted to meet the Chofetz Chaim. He traveled to Europe, and he comes to the Chofetz Chaim's home, and he sees the type of home he lives in. It's the closest thing to a hovel. Rickety furniture. The bookcase is a few boards nailed together. Nothing to write home about. And he says to the Chofetz Chaim, he says, I'm amazed. I thought if I'd see you, one of the greatest, holiest people in the world, you'd be living in something which is considered appropriate, something which is more respectful, more honorable. Because if you knew in Europe the way the great holy Rebbes lived, the Ger Rebbe, all the Rebbes, they lived like princes. They were treated like princes. The type of clothing they wore, the coach they were taken in, with horsemen and all kinds of things, entourages of people accompanying them. Chofetz Chaim didn't even wear rabbinic garb. He wore a fisherman's cap. And people, if you didn't know who he was, you didn't even know he was a rabbi. So he says to him, he says, I'm amazed, I'm taken aback. So the Chofetz Chaim says to him, and he's a wealthy man, he's better where you're staying in town these days. I'm staying in the inn down the road. He says, could you describe to me the room that you're staying in? He says, well, the drapes hanging over the windows are faded. The wash basin, the handle of the wash basin is broken. The rug is shredded. The springs are coming out of the mattress. And after he finishes describing how the room looks, Chofetz Chaim says, a man of your wealth lives in such a paltry, such a destitute type of setting. He says, Rabbi, you have to understand, I'm just passing through. So Chofetz Chaim says, I'm also passing through. That's the famous punchline of the Chofetz Chaim. But the Rabbeinu Bachya says, he lived in the sojournings of his father. Sojourning means he's a ger. And he shows, regarding all the Avos HaKadoshim, the patriarchs, everyone referred to himself as ger. As wealthy as Avram was, as much as that he was proclaimed Nasi Elokim, the Prince of God, Yitzchak, his wealth was to be envied, that Avimelech drove him out of the community because he embarrassed him, because people would say that the dung of Yitzchak's donkeys, mules, have greater value than Avimelech's gold. And Yaakov, he comes back with such wealth, and yet they say, we're Gerim. He lived in the sojournings of his father. So he explains, because to them, the world is only to be here only as a means, not an end unto itself. It's only the world is to facilitate the objective, to meet the challenges, whatever those challenges may be. Therefore, the Torah uses the term to identify exactly how they live their lives in this existence. It's the sojournings of their father. Beretz Canaan, the land of Canaan. So you could ask us, we know Yitzchak is that. What Beretz Canaan? We say in the Psukim Zimrin, Shachris, Vayivorach David, we say, Atu Hashem Elokim Hashem B'charta Ba'avrom, V'otzei Sicha Me'or Kazdim. You chose Avrom, you had taken him out of the Ur Kazdim, the kiln of Kazdim, V'samta Shmo Avraham, and you put his name to be Avraham. At the age of 99, he became Avraham. But why did he merit to become Avraham at the age of 99, to father the future patriarch of Klal Yisrael? Is because he took him out of the kiln. And the Medrash says explicitly, when Avram went into the kiln, Hashem said to Avram, if you don't go into the kill, then you die and you bow. You'll be a special person. But to be the ultimate person, to be the founding father of the Jewish people, you will only be that if you go into the kiln. So when he went to the kiln to give his life, not to bow, that established him as the future patriarch, and it manifested itself, it evolved that he became Avraham at the age of 99. What's the paragraph we say right after that? V'choresim abris. As a result of that, when he became Avram, Hashem entered into a bris with him to give him Eretz HaKanan Echit Aprizi, the land of the 7 nations. Now, we find regarding the 7 nations of Canaan, there's a mitzvah of Lo Schai Kol Neshama. The nations have to be annihilated. Why do they have to be annihilated? Because the Torah speaks explicitly that because of their abominable behavior at every level, the land spit them out. They are a certain representation of evil. Because Avram became Avraham, and his value and objective is to do what? Is to counter evil in the world. Therefore, God entered into covenant to give him the land of Canaan, that he should be the one to cleanse that location from the evil, which that evil was represented by the 7 nations of Canaan. So the influence of Canaan was similar to the influence of Egypt. Just being there, it's almost impossible to survive, spiritually speaking. The answer is he went to the sojournings of his father, Yitzchak in Canaan. That despite the influence, the environment, it was to the nth degree, the antithesis of what Kedusha is, that's where the others were. And only because they lived there as Gerim, it was only sojourning, that they only utilized the location only purely as an objective, as a means, not an end. That's the reason why they succeeded. That's number one. That's what it tells us Eretz Canaan. Not to tell us Eretz Canaan the location. Eretz Canaan in terms of what it represented. That's firstly. Secondly, when we calculate the time, the 400 years of the Ger Yizaracha, your children will be strangers in the land which is not theirs. Until Yitzis Mitzrayim, we have 400 years. When is that time calculated? It's calculated from the birth of Yitzchak. So the Maral of Prague asks, but it wasn't enslavement. The enslavement started in Egypt. It did not start in Canaan. So on that he goes to explain that in terms of the Avos HaKadosh, with who they were, because of what they represented and what Canaan represented, that was the equivalent of what? Of bondage. They were in a location which was totally something which at that level was so alien and so intolerable, they were in bondage. It's only when the Jews, when we came to Egypt and they stopped circumcising themselves, where they didn't see that evil as evil, then it had to be converted into physical bondage. So therefore we calculate the time from the birth of Yitzchak. Since the sojournings of what? Of Yitzchak, Be'eretz Canaan. The calculation, the 400 years is Eretz Canaan. So it's not location-wise, it's in terms of representation-wise. And now, go ahead.
Why would they portray Yaakov's participation or living in the land as settling, which implies a level of more commitment and permanence, as compared to Yitzhak, where they say it's his sojournings, which implies more wandering?
Before I explain, just make the point. When Yaakov found out that Yosef was alive, he says, now I'll go see my son Yosef before I die. Now that he's alive, because he realized Yosef is not coming to Canaan. He's going to Egypt. So the night before he left, Hashem appears to him in the dream and he says, Al tira mer de Mitzrayim. Don't be afraid, concerned you're going to Egypt, because I will take you there and I will bring you back. Meaning Yaakov himself didn't want to leave Canaan. He was forced to leave. And Hashem gave him the guarantee, when you go, you come back and you will be buried in Canaan. So Yaakov's attachment to Canaan was more than Avram and Yitzchak. Now the question is why? Rameh Simcha of Dvinsk makes it a point that we find that the whole concept of outreach, which is referred to by Yikra B'Shem Hashem, he called name of Hashem, we find it by Avram, we find it by Yitzchak, and we find it slightly by Yaakov. Why? Because their value and their purpose was to disseminate and make the world aware of monotheism and to refute pagan beliefs. So there was an interaction with humanity. Yaakov Avinu, once he had his children and the 12 tribes were born, he wasn't involved in that any longer. He was a self-contained entity, and being that entity generated a kedusha, that kedusha impacted on the world. That representation of good versus evil, because it was that special level, it dispelled the evil of the world just because of its own existence. So he didn't need the actual interaction to interact with people. His representation of what he was created a certain level of kedusha in the world, clarity, which became available to the world, although Yaakov was not involved with disseminating monotheism in the world. That's Rabbi Simcha of Dvinsk. Therefore, you don't find the B'Shem Hashem regarding Yaakov. So it could be the reason why he settled and he was less concerned, which was different than the others. Seems to be there was more of a connection because, firstly, he is the future of Klal Yisrael. Yaakov is the father of the 12 tribes. That is Klal Yisrael. It just has to be fleshed out. We need 600,000. That's the critical mass. But in terms of the root, the DNA in each one of the tribes, which is the profile, the infrastructure of Jewish people, that's already settled. When he came back, at this moment, all 12 sons were born. As a result of that, he was able to have a greater connection to the land than his father and his grandfather. After the Torah speaks about how the settling of Esav and his children in a very abbreviated way, because they're not valued sufficiently for the Torah to explain how exactly they settled in their locations. Torah speaks about Har Seir, which was the location of Esav, and exactly the wars that went on, how they conquered the Chori. Then the Torah goes and explains all the events of Yaakov's family and his children in a lengthy manner. Kol Gegule Sibosim, how things happened. Lefi Shem Chashuvim, Lefnei Amokim L'Harich Behem, because they have special importance, and therefore Hashem speaks about them in a detailed, lengthy manner. The 10 generations of Odom to Noach, Ploni, holy Ploni. The Torah goes quickly, just mentions the various heads of the families. Avram, Kitz Kotzebem, also very abbreviated. Avram Herichbo. And when it comes to Avram, he speaks in a lengthy manner, speaking about the very particular events, the experiences of Avram. Moshel, what is it now? So the Mogorlu Shenof the Ben Achol, person loses a diamond or a pearl in the sand. Odem Mashmesh Bechol, the cover Bekavora, at Shemotzi Saragol. You take a sifter, you put the sand in the sifter, and you start sifting the sand to locate that diamond, locate that pearl. And once you locate the pearl, you throw away the sand and the rocks and the pebbles, and all you do is you focus on that diamond or on that pearl. Therefore, the Torah now is very, very specific. Davaracher, Vayeshev Yaakov Hapishtoni Azer. person who's a flax merchant. Flax is needed for what? To make silk, to make linen. Nichtazu gemalav tun and pishton. His camels were loaded up with flax. Habachomi tomo. So the blacksmith was taken aback. Oh no, yikodes kla pishton hazer. I mean, how with all the camels loaded up with all this flax, how could you bring them into a location, like into a warehouse? It was a person who was a wise guy. Kechot means a wise guy, not a wise person. He said to him, he says, one spark comes out of your bellows with the location where you have the fire, where you heat the iron, it'll consume all the flax. So the flax seems to be so much, one spark will consume it all. Yaakov saw all the princes of Esav, Toma of Omar. He was like overwhelmed, and he was wondering, how could I counter all these various families of Esav? Elu told us Yaakov Yosef. Who are the children of Yaakov Yosef? Sivoya Beis Yaakov Eish. We just read that in last week's Haftorah. Posuk in Avadio. The house of Yaakov will be fire. Beis Yosef Lahova. The house of Yosef is the flame. Or Beis Esav Lakash. The house of Esav will be like straw. Yotzei Nitzutz Yotzei Mi Yosef. Shemachalav Soris Kulam. A spark leaves Yosef, and the spark of Yosef, which is the Lahova, that's the flame that reaches out, that will consume all these families of Esav. That's Esav Lakash. And that's what we find when Yosef was born initially. Yaakov says to Lavan after 14 years, I'm ready to leave. Because now he has a representation of someone who will count. The countering doesn't mean Yosef was an infant, he was just born. It means that he's born into the Yaakov. Yaakov now has representation that he has the ability to counter whatever Esav stands for. The Gemara tells us in Bava Basra, and we spoke about this in the past. Why was Yosef the Lahova? Why was he the flame? If you have a fire without a flame, it cannot reach out. You need a flame to reach out to consume. When Yosef was born, he was the Lahova. So Gemara tells him Bava Basra, in Zaro shel Esav nofel ela biad Zaro shel Rachel. The progeny of Esav only falls into the hands of the progeny of Rachel. It doesn't say Yosef. Binyamin had the same ability as Yosef. Binyamin was also Lahova, also had that characteristic of being the flame. And the Gemara therefore says that there was no war that we ever had with Amalek that the children of Rachel were not involved in the war. Who led the first war against Amalek? Yeshua ben Nun, right? He was the closest student of Moshe Rabbeinu. Now Yeshua was from which tribe? He was from the tribe of Ephraim. That was the son of Yosef. And what about Mordechai? Mordechai and Esther.
Amen.
Right? That was Binyamin. Again, there's a progeny of Rachel. So every battle against Amalek, which is the progeny of Esav, there's always Zaro shel Rachel. So it's not specifically limited to Yosef. It could even be Binyamin. Now the question is, what is special about Zaro shel Rachel? Why is it Zaro shel Rachel? Why only her progeny are able to counter what Esav represents? Why are they the flame? What about the other children? Yehuda's Malchus. Yehuda's kingship. Yehuda's power. But without Yosef, you can't counter. There's some element of Amalek, of Esav. It can only be countered by Zaro shel Rachel. The question is why? What was, it says there was agitation in Rivka's womb. They were fighting. What were they fighting over? They were fighting over both worlds. And they came to an agreement. The spiritual world is Yaakov's, and the physical world is Esav. Physicality, Esav is the man of the field. He's the hunter. Yaakov is Tam Yoshev Olim. He's the man of the tent. He's committed to Torah. The Medrash tells us that when they met, that after Esav sent the gift, Yaakov sent the gift to Esav, the herds, the flocks, and whatever else, Esau was amazed. And he says, something? Seems to be that, you didn't keep the agreement. We had an agreement. You have the spiritual world, I have the physical world. Where do you have all this wealth? Where's it come? Where's it coming from? So he says, it was endowed to me by God. God gave it to me. So he says, but I don't understand. He says, I'll tell you the difference between me and you. For me, the material's value was only to facilitate the spirituality. The material has no value unto itself. The physical world's yours to do with what you want. That's yours. And that's why we find the bracha that Yitzchak had given Esau regarding Yaakov is iti Elokim. Elokim is midas adin. If you deserve it, you get it. If you don't deserve it, you don't get it. But for Esau, even if he doesn't deserve it, Hashem gives it to him. Why? Because Yaakov, the Jewish people understand that if they're denied, they don't come with a claim against Hashem. They attribute the reason why they're denied is they attribute that to their own unworthiness. So they don't come with a claim against Hashem. Rashi cites the Midrash over there. But the non-Jew, Esau, if God denies him something that he believes he should have, he comes with a claim. And it begins bolting and saying things which are totally inappropriate. Therefore, even if he's unworthy, God gives it to him. So the non-Jew is what Esau is purely material for the sake of material. Yaakov is only the material only to facilitate the spiritual. That's what Yaakov answered Esau. Rachel Imenu was one of the most beautiful women who ever lived. And that's why Yosef was beautiful. But not that he assumed a characteristic of beauty only, because Binyamin also had it. And Binyamin wasn't as beautiful as Yosef. But Rachel, what it says, Zarosha Rachel. Rachel was the primary matriarch. She was the primary wife of Yaakov. She took her beauty and every aspect of physicality, and she subjugated, as Alan used the word, and consecrated for God. That means she had the ability to dominate the material, physical. She dominates physical. And because she dominates physical, as she dominated, she took and dedicated every aspect of her being to serve Hashem. Therefore, her progeny have that ability to dominate the physical. So Esau represents the ultimate level, the epitome of physical. Therefore, in Zarosha, Esau nofel el Zarosha Rochel. Therefore, the progeny of Esau falls into the hands of Rochel. It's not they per se themselves, but because the progeny of Rochel, that is that level of representation to dominate the physical. Story in the Torah, which it's literally it's painful to even read it. Rachel is barren. Leah has 4 children, and then afterwards, the Torah tells us that Reuven went out and brings the mandrakes back to his mother. And Rachel asks Leah, could I have the mandrakes? And she says to her sister, who's barren, has no children, there's the only chance maybe this would somehow address her problem. You nearly took my husband, now you want to take my mandrakes. You have 4 children, she has nobody. She gave you the code words. Otherwise, you wouldn't be even the wife of Yaakov. And that's what you speak to. That's the way you speak to a sister. I mean, you cringe with this. What level? How insensitive could a sister be to a sister? And what do you mean? You nearly took my husband. Yaakov would not be your husband if not for me, right? Just a simple understanding of the story. You read about Lavan in Chazal. This man was so conniving and such a bad person, not to be believed. They were engaged for 7 years. During the 7-year period, a chosen sends gifts to his future bride over the 7-year period. What do you think happened to these gifts? Lavan would intercept those gifts, and they would never arrive by Rachel. She would give the gifts to Leah, and Leah believed that Yaakov was sending her the gifts during the 7 years of courtship. And she believed Yaakov was her husband. And Yaakov was actually showing his affection for all these years. because he diverted the gifts to give it to her. Rachel remained silent all those years. Rachel could have gone to Yaakov and said, you know what's going on? You know what kind of father I have? Why didn't she do it? Because she said, if I share this with Yaakov, you know what's going to happen? He's going to go to my father. They're going to get into an argument. And you know what's going to be? Neither of us are going to be the matriarchs. Better she should be the matriarch, at least there'll be a Jewish people. Because if I should divulge this to Yaakov, there's no Jewish people. This is explicit in the Midrash. So Leah was under the impression that she was the soulmate of Yaakov. And when she gave her the code words, she believed, in passing, she gave her the words. She didn't even realize what she was sharing with her. And when she was under that chuppah, she believed she's the bride of what? Of Yaakov. She believed that. Because of all the courtship, all what was going on. So why is she the matriarch of Klal Yisrael? It says, Rachel mevakel boneo. Rachel cries for her children, but the children of Leah are not her children. The answer, because if not for Rachel, there wouldn't be a Leah. Because if she would have shared this information with Yaakov, there wouldn't have been a Jewish people. That's the silence. The silence wasn't only the code words. The silence were all these years that she suppressed this, that she would not share this with Yaakov. So as a result of that all of a sudden Leah believes Rachel's trying to snatch her husband from her. After Yaakov shows all this affection to her, now you want to take him from me?
Right.
A good question. See, Dvorah, that's explicit in Chazal.
Right.
Why?
But I'm saying she's not the same caliber as.
No, not for that reason. See, the Torah doesn't mention the passing of Leah, the passing of Zilpah and Bilhah,
Only Rachel.
but it speaks about the passing of Rachel, right? Dvorah, it's because the Torah, Rashi explains this, the name of Chazal, because when Dvorah originally was sent to tell Yaakov it's time to come back, Rivka had sent her. That was her nursemaid originally when she left her father's home, Dvorah.
She was an old woman at the time, right?
Dvorah menekes Rivka. So when it says she passed away, really, the Torah is telling us that Rivka passed away at that time. So why doesn't the Torah make this public knowledge? So Rashi says, because if people would know that Rivka passed away, they would say, cursed is that womb who bore Esav. Esav was a world-renowned monster. That's who Esav was. He was a murderer. He was a philanderer. He was seen by the world as a terror. So the Torah kept it quiet when she passed away, because the people should not curse Rivka. That's Rashi. That's Chazal. But you're asking a good question. Why did Torah only speak out the passing of Rachel? Now, why did Rachel pass away at such a young age?
Right. The
Because
curse
she
of
took
Yaakov.
the fetuses of her father, and Yaakov says, whoever has the fetuses, lo yichya. That person will not live. See, she only died because of that comment that Yaakov had made. Yaakov was the cause of Rachel to pass away before her time.
Right.
The numerical value, the Chazal say, Yaakov lived 33 years less than his father, because the numerical value, lo yichya is 33. Because he said lo yichya, therefore he had that many years taken off his life. He was the cause of his wife's passing. So as a result of that, could be, and that's the reason why ultimately she wasn't buried in Mars Machpelah with him. It's a number of reasons. But because of that, because it's attributed to Yaakov, as a result of that, therefore the Torah speaks about her passing, besides the Kever Rachel being so essential to the future, therefore it doesn't speak about Leah, because Leah was buried in the Mars Machpelah, because she happened to be the one who merited to be the matriarch to be paired with Yaakov. Okay, it's time to learn